Welcome to Beyond the Game More Stories, the podcast where we explore the lessons sports teach us about life, leadership, adversity, and growth long after the final whistle. I'm your host, Dwayne Lightfoot Jr. On this show, we sit down with athletes, parents, coaches, and leaders just to have real conversations about the moments that shape us, the different challenges we experience, the victories, big and small, the setbacks, and the experiences that stay with us long after the scoreboard goes dark. All right, well, let's get into today's episode. So, today's guest is someone who's dedicated her life and career to helping others heal and navigate life's challenges. She's a licensed clinical mental health counselor, professor, coach, co author, and many other hats that she's currently wearing. She currently has more than 18 years of experience in the mental health field. For over a decade, she served as the chief executive officer of Confidential Confessions Counseling, where she's committed herself to creating a safe space for people to speak openly, heal, and move forward in their lives. Her work and expertise has earned her national recognition, whereas in 2023, she was featured in Forbes magazine. She authored the article 7 Emotional Challenges to Managing When Changing Careers, which offers insight into the emotional side of the personal and professional transitions. Academically, she's built an impressive foundation, earning degrees in psychology and mental health counseling. She also holds a Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses certification and a Women's Entrepreneurship certificate from Cornell University, combining her passions for mental health, leadership, and entrepreneurship. Through her work as a counselor, educator, and leader, she continues to empower individuals to better understand themselves and overcome challenges to pursue healthier and more fulfilled lives. Today, we get the opportunity to go beyond the titles and hear the stories and lessons and all the different experiences that have shaped her journeys. Please help me welcome Keisha Saunders-Waldron to the podcast. Hello, Keisha. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
Oh no, I appreciate you for taking the time to do this. This is a project that I'm working on, and it means a lot to me that you would take some time out of your busy schedule to come out here and just offer some of your expertise, because I think, this is something that not just the sporting world, but the world needs to know more about. And having somebody like you come on here just gives it immediate credibility to just the extent of where the world is at with this, and just kind of different ways that we can help everybody, not just athletes. We can help parents, coaches, individuals, non-athletes, everybody, as we go through this journey together.
Absolutely. The world is filled with uncertainty right now, and being able to have a clear mind, you can make effective decisions, not only as an athlete, but as a human being.
Yep, very true. So, all right. Normally, when you and I sit down and talk, a lot of times, I'm very open about it. You've been somebody that I've confided in a lot. I've been on your virtual couch. You've talked me off some bridges and everything. And a lot of times, we're normally covered by confidentiality, so to speak. But today the conversation is open to everyone. So, I always like to start at the beginning, because this podcast is not just about the athletes or individuals. It's about the person. So the people that I'm talking to, I think, bring a lot of knowledge and I want to dive into that, not just where a lot of people want to look at the highlights and everything. I want to get down to the brass tacks of everything. So just to kind of set the stage for everybody listening, I know some people may be wondering why we're taking the podcast in this direction. Like you said, kind of with the state of where everything is at nowadays. And I agree, that's a fair question. Anybody can ask that. But for me, this conversation is personal. Many people, through the book that I published, or through just other episodes, you've heard my story, and they know about the different mental and health challenges that I faced during and after my playing careers. And I'm very proud to say that kind of over the past 10 to 15 years, the conversation around mental health has become more open and more widely accepted to be had.
Hmm.
So we're talking about it in ways that we didn't before. But again, there's still plenty more to unpack, especially when it comes to just individuals and athletes. So mental health doesn't just affect those athletes or how someone feels off the court, but it also directly impacts their performance and confidence, decision making, and just overall well being during the competition. So this isn't just about the awareness; it's about understanding how deeply connected mental health is to every part of people's journeys. We talk a lot about
Absolutely.
life beyond the game, and and what their journey looks like. So that's why I wanted to do this, and that's why I appreciate you taking the time to come on here and do this.
I also want to address that for those who are asking. Your brain is a muscle, and where the brain goes, the body goes. So it is a necessary conversation when we're talking about productivity on and off the court. You have to build that brain as a muscle in order to be effective and productive in other spaces. So this is a necessary conversation. And although it may be just a segment, it's something that continues to need to be talked about between athletes and those who are not on the court. Why? Because your brain dictates what your body does.
Mhm.
So,
A lot of the reasons why I think now it's becoming more acceptable to have this conversation or to be on the news or to be on sports shows or to be on just TV episodes of shows and stuff in general is because we're getting more information about it. So the more we understand about it, the more we're going to be able to diagnose stuff earlier on and helps save lives and all kinds of things. So I again, this to me is something that's very important to the future of not just athletes but everybody in general. You and I both, we're parents. We're bringing up kids in this world, and we want to be able to make sure that we're preparing them as best for the different challenges that life brings to them.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So all righty. So again, I thank you for doing this and just taking the time to come out and talk with me on this. Like I said, I always start at the beginning. So as I kind of jump in here, can you kind of just tell me a bit about your journey? What led you to getting into the mental health space, or just kind of in helping others just navigate their own challenges?
Yeah, they always say that usually those who become counselors had to deal with something in life. But my journey started very trivial, I would say, from a Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd episode. I always tell this because I laugh. I was like, yes, I used to watch cartoons, but it really started from Bugs Bunny being Elmer Fudd's psychologist on one episode, and I said, I want to do that. But then the journey continued with a phenomenal uh, 11th grade psychology teacher, Mr. Simpson. I don't know where you are in the world, but Mr. Simpson, and that grew my passion. Once I left high school, I started getting involved with the community and finding out where the aspect of the community that needed help. And I understood that I couldn't do much with a psychology degree to help in that facet. So counseling became the next way to support communities that don't understand mental health, and how I could be an advocate, a voice between the system and the community. And that's why I started this.
A lot of people may not necessarily know, our background. You've been somebody who I've talked to many a times about some of the things going on in my life, and just being able to hear some of the things that I struggle with now and not judge me. Again, I think the your business that you're running, the people that you're helping, are in a much better space because you've been somebody who I've seen how you can help people work through their problems and everything. Again, you've helped me. Just I take my hat off to you for, and I guess Mr. Simpson for bringing you into this space. And again, I'm a kid of the 80s and 90s too, so I remember the Elmer Fudd, Bugs Bunny cartoon, which a lot of people, if you think about just the dichotomy of that, Elmer Fudd's
Mhm.
frustrations were tied to the actions of Bugs Bunny, and he's
Mhm.
turning around and now he's the one who's trying to help you, but like, hey, I know you couldn't catch me and all of that, but again, very important conversation to have. So just As we kind of dive into today's sports environment, again, like I said, that conversation around mental health is becoming more and more open, more and more important every day, and you're seeing it, everywhere you look now. But if, say, an athlete or a coach or a parent recognizes that they are someone who's in need of support, what are some of the resources or steps you would recommend for somebody to kind of start with?
Yeah, so the first thing I would recommend is somebody to validate, and to listen. Most people listen to seek to be understood, but not seeking to understand. So we want to listen, we want to validate, and we want to observe changes in the behavior, and then depending on the situation, reach out to a person who is trusted, whether that be the parent, the coach, or the athlete. Find somebody that will actually hear what you have to say. From that point, given the severity of the issue, it may be you could reach out to 988, a crisis line if there is suicidal ideations. You can reach out to Psychology Today, which is a great resource to see all of the therapists that are available in your area. Some of them even have videos and access to bring you into the space. And then there could be organizations within your university. The university has counseling centers that students can go to. There is a gamut of resources that a parent, a student athlete, or a coach can go and we talk together because it's a community of people that one person impacts. So it's going to take the community to assist with that help as well.
It it is something that I think, even though we're starting to learn more about, a lot of people still don't truly understand a lot about this. Now, I'm somebody who, again, my story. I started developing stuff during college. Kind of got through all of that back in the early 2000s. But when you struggle with something like a depression or an anxiety or those other kind of diseases, it just takes one thing to trigger to have a reaction. I give the analogy, and it's not necessarily the best one, but at one point in my life, I was really close friends with somebody who was a recovering alcoholic. Through the
Mhm.
gym that I was working in, I was just kind of talking with him about it, and he said something to me that really hit me, and he said, "Hey." I was like, "Congratulations." I think he must have hit like his 1,000 day or something, and I was like, "Congratulations," and
Yeah.
just the uneducated side of me was like, on beating this, not being an alcoholic, and he said, "No, I will always be an alcoholic. I'm just one drink away from slipping back." Right? And that breaks his streak and everything, and, in 2011, I lost a really close friend of mine, and that triggered a lot of the depression that I went through and just brought back feelings that I felt 11 years earlier. So you're literally it's something that you're going to battle forever. There is no cure for this. You can feel better, but again, it's a process that you have to go through.
Absolutely. And I think we're trying to end the stigma is like wording around it, right? Mental health issues is not seen as a disease. It is definitely a concern. And just like with anything, you have to work on those concerns because they are steadily concerns that show up all the time. I am depressed. I'm not my depression. What do I do about it? I have anxiety. What do I do about it? Depression is, when I think about it, it is a sad stricken emotion for something from the past. When I think about anxiety, it is a future stricken emotion because I'm uncertain about my future, which then anxiety comes in trying to give all the solutions, possible scenarios so that you can plan. But being present is the present. And so these are just mental health concerns that may not go away, they may lessen, but it's okay. It takes discipline in order for it to lessen in your space.
Yeah, and I think what you just said, I hope everybody was able to catch it and fully grasp what you meant by when you said being present is a present, and I think that is something that a lot of people take for advantage. Like, where am I at today? Because I'm here, let me invest this, let me try to, and again, it just takes you have to start somewhere, right? So everything, like I said, my friend who was recovering from alcoholism, he had to have a day one. He has to admit his problem, his issue, decide he wants to have a different outcome, and then you have to start somewhere. And a lot of times, the biggest step to take is that first one. But
Absolutely. And you just said something so key. Event plus response equals outcome. There's an event that happened. He took a response, a positive one, that then led to a better outcome. But whatever you choose to do, you get to dictate the outcome.
yeah, yeah. And again, I know right now, I mean, that was we're talking 15 years ago, and he's still doing great. So I'm very proud of him for that. So, but again, like we said, as I mentioned earlier, you and I both are parents, right? We both have two little ones. Mine aren't that little. I've got a 14 and a 12-year-old. But I know you have two younger kids, and I know being a mom is one of the most important things in everything that you do. I know I see that smile right there. I know how much you put into those two kids, and you're watching them grow, and they're starting their journey into sports. Your daughter is getting into dance, and she's doing amazing. I've seen the videos you posted, and your son, even though I'm extremely biased, he's playing a lot of sports. He's into football, he's into soccer, he's doing basketball. So as they're going through this journey and just kind of beginning this, you being somebody who's in the mental health field, with having the knowledge that you do, you understand the different impacts that sports can have on somebody, positive and negatively. What are some of the lessons that you're trying to instill in your two early, to kind of help them build a foundation as they go through this journey?
Absolutely. I always tell them treat life like a marathon and not a sprint. They're always like, what does that mean? You train for it. It's gonna be tough, but if you keep up with the endurance and the resilience, and your strength, you can do it. I always tell them, I try to have them separate their identity, versus their performance. Who are you versus what you're actually doing? Don't let them become one. Outside of this sport that you're choosing, you are this person, and those strengths you are adding to this performance. So that is something that I really teach them, that they need to have their own identity outside of sports, because there are so many life lessons in sports, but we want to make sure that you know who you are. So in the event that there is a failure, you can still stand strong on the identity that you had before entering into that performance state of those sports.
When you start playing sports, you were not an athlete first, right? And it is awesome that you mentioned that, because, and I now owe you this. Through what the podcast that I'm working through, we have official merchandise. I just designed brand new shirts last night, and I'm gonna send you one for the two kids. But on the front of it, it says, "I am more than an athlete." So
Mhm.
that way they understand, it doesn't matter, how many points I scored, or how many touchdowns I scored, or again, not into dance. I'm a boy dad, so I don't know if the triple axle or whatever your daughter's doing in dance.
She does dance and she does gymnastics. So right now we're doing vaults and bars and floor routines. And so yeah, it like
Yeah,
she's yeah,
yeah.
girl
So
activity.
it doesn't matter if she's getting a perfect 10 or whatever. You're raising these kids to understand not only who they are, but whose they are, and it's helping them
Yeah.
build that foundation. And that's what I find as being the most important part is, I use the term muscle memory a lot when I train kids, right? We want to
Mhm.
do something so much that when it comes time to just do it, our muscle memory is that action that we want it to be. So if I have a bad game, I've got to realize, this is not just about, you know, the performance that I just did over the last 40 minutes. In the book that I wrote, I talked about some of the stuff that I was dealing with, hecklers and everything. And I wrote down that, that fan that's giving me that grief gets to take off their team shirt when they get done. But even
Mhm.
though my jersey comes off at the end of the game, I'm still a person, and I still got to think about the stuff that you said to me and everything. And in that moment, you're only seeing me as an athlete, right? And that's a tunnel
Hmm.
that I can just go down and be stuck in. I've got to understand, like, and I love the message that you're teaching your kids about understanding who else you are outside of just that. And that's why I think when I wrote that chapter, when I designed these shirts, I think it's a very important message that everybody needs to hear. And
Absolutely, absolutely. Building that emotional muscle and having an identity. We all have an identity before we check into work, before we check in, even before we check into our house. Like we have an identity before those roles and responsibilities take place. So how do we separate it so that we don't utilize some of the roles and responsibilities that we don't need and name them as failures?
yeah. So again, you've been somebody we've talked a lot. Again, I've been on the virtual couch with you. I don't know how many times over the years. But and again, like I said, my story. So as I go back looking at just some of my own personal journey, I remember there was a period in time where I just found myself struggling and I didn't really understand it. I didn't know what I was feeling. I didn't know how to express it. I didn't have people around me asking me certain questions or anything. So a lot of times I just kind of masked and misplaced the different feelings and emotions that I was having instead of putting them in the forefront and kind of dealing with them. So for athletes and the people around them, whether it's the parent, the teammate, the coaches, friends, or anybody like that, what are some of the early warning signs that someone might be struggling with their mental health that somebody could see? Because I didn't even see them myself.
Absolutely. Well, that you just talked about an early warning sign. Masking and misplacing emotions is a warning sign. We watch for personality shifts, withdrawal, isolation from maybe teammates. There's this academic decline that happens. We're not going to study hall like we used to, right? The sleep and the appetite changes. There could be this increase for irritability and emotional flatness. And we've always, I tell people with emotional flatness, it's like a meh emoji. Like there's no range in emotions, so it's really really flat. And then maybe the athlete has a sudden change in their performance. It either drops or they start to overtrain as a way to escape, right? The body always keeps score. So struggles always surface. So knowing that. And I think for individuals, if you're close enough to them, your teammates are close enough to you, they can watch their observable changes and then they can say something like, hey, I'm recognizing that X, Y, and Z is happening. Do you want to talk about it? Make room to have that conversation.
And now that you mention these kinds of things, like I think back to my process and a lot of the signs that you early signs that you just quoted just then are a lot of things that I realized I went through. Like the distancing myself from my teammates. And my teammates would invite me to go out and I didn't want to go out. I
Mm-hmm.
literally hung by myself. I would people talked about me because not negatively, but they always thought that I was like not somebody who really liked people because whenever I walked around campus, I had headphones on my ears. I didn't want people to talk to me. I was just kind of in my own world. And I think having not known what I was experiencing, what I was going through, I'm certain some of my teammates went through the same thing. And it's just it wasn't known enough by us to be able to check on each other. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the tough part about it.
And I think too, you said you didn't have language or really not understanding, but it's also about the self awareness piece. Like, are you like how self-aware are you? Again, being present is a present, but if everybody is pulling on you and everybody needs something for you, you don't have to have time to be presently present with yourself. So I think it'd be like being able to check on yourself, like what is really happening to me. And I guarantee you, if somebody had asked you the questions, what was leading up to this feeling of depression, then you might have been able to name it. But because nobody was asking you what was going on, and it just became your normal routine, it just got left unprocessed, which then you dealt with it longer than you had to.
I think the things that you listed are amazing, great warning signs that I think, we all seen all those posters they would have on walls and everything for smoking and everything. Again, I'm not on college campuses anymore, but I hope they're starting to put more signage up about that, around that, and just more education about it because again, it is a very serious part of the culture that can have some very serious outcomes. We just recently saw a football player, Rondell Moore, took his own life. I know when I was my very first experience with death, my next door neighbor committed suicide. I had another kid my senior year in high school drove his car off of the bridge in an attempt because he was struggling with everything, and it's something that mental health has touched everybody's life, whether they
And
realize it or not.
absolutely. Can I change one thing that you said in that? I loved it, but we have to change the stigma together. People commit crimes, they do not commit suicide. So we want to make sure that we know that people die by suicide, just like you die by cancer, you die by a stroke, you die. And that just means that somebody was sad enough that the weight was so heavy that that was their last resort. I'm sorry. I just had to
Yeah.
say. I,
No, and again, like I said, I am somebody who's dealt with this for almost 25 years now, and I'm learning. So I know I appreciate that education piece of it because that's one thing about this, and that was why I wanted to have this conversation. There is an education piece that people who I have a shirt that says privilege is those acting like problems aren't problems because they don't bother them. Right. So
mm,
there are some people who don't really realize what's going on because they don't have any firsthand experience. But there are people who are going through it who have some experience, but we don't know it all. So I appreciate you giving me that information, and I will make that change in the way I speak.
yeah. I just think of it as a community, as a humanity, if we plant the seed positively, then I believe that it just stretches out to others. And so making the change, and I think we all had to make the change because you hear people say it so much. It was like, I was like,
Mhm.
no, because we don't want you to demonize the how sad they felt, right? Like we don't demonize people any other way that they die. So why that? And I say demonize because there's a negative connotation to it. It's almost like once you do that, it's like you're outcast. And so it's just another way to die, and that's the way that they chose to die.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so I appreciate that. That is a very great nugget piece, and I think that's something that a lot of people are gonna. I'm hoping that if they only get a couple of things from my entire podcast, I hope they understand what you just said. I think that being present is a present, and that I think thus far are two of the things that people need to really hone in on. And just as we're continuing to learn more about this as a culture, just be open to learning. You know.
Yeah. And I'm just re thinking about myself right now. I was like, they didn't choose that. They didn't choose to die that way. They just felt so sad that that was the only way of escape. That wasn't a chosen way to end life. That it was the only way they felt that they could escape from those emotions.
I often tell people that sometimes as you're going through this, you ask yourself, how do I get to tomorrow? But again, sometimes those walls start closing in even more, and the question goes, well, how do I get through this dinner? And then the
Mhm.
question becomes, how do I get through this class that I have to go sit in, or how do I get through? But it ultimately comes down to how do I get through these next 5 minutes? How do I get through this next minute? And that's where
Yeah.
you start to build that streak, find ways of getting through it, and it just that 1 minute, you go through it, you try to find ways that'll help you, and then eventually that 1 minute becomes 3 minutes. You're like, okay, well, I'm okay now, but how do I get through these next 3 minutes? And you just create that continued growth, until again you're at days and weeks, and but you have to keep doing the things that you're doing. You can't just it's not like and this may not be the best analogy, but I've had a couple of surgeries, and I go through my physical therapy. Once I get out of physical therapy, I used to just be like, all right, I'm done with that. I don't need to do my exercises anymore. No, I got to keep that stuff up. Otherwise things
Mhm.
come back.
Absolutely.
Earlier you kind of mentioned this. We all talk about just how toughness has always been something that's kind of in the sports culture, and because of that, some athletes may find it as a sign of weakness to ask for help, right? And that to me is not true. I think it's actually more of a sign of strength if you're able to ask for help. With the people that you've worked with and just the experience and the education that you have, what are some of the other common stigmas around mental health, not necessarily just sports, but in life, that at this point in time need to be challenged or reevaluated or debunked?
Oh, uh, let's just talk about the toughness. Um, Toughness and vulnerability. Toughness and vulnerability are not opposite. Asking for help requires more courage than suffering and silence for sure. And another one I'm going to add into that, we treat physical injuries, so don't we deserve that our brains deserve the same care? Do you tell an athlete who just tore his ACL, like, you'll be fine? No, it takes some actual training and some learning, and our brain is the organ that deserves the same amount of care and attention. Again, what I said, where the brain goes, the body goes. And so that is important, because if the mental shift is correct, then everything else will be correct. Mental wellness is a performance enhancer, not a distraction. So if we shift the culture from being tough to being whole, right? Mental health is a wholeness. Your physical health is a wholeness, right? It's spiritual health, wholeness. It creates a person. So if we shift it from being tough to, nah, I don't want to be tough. I want to be whole. And this is the way that I'm choosing to be whole, working on my mental, working on my physical, working on my spiritual. Also, debunking just as a culture, that busyness is effectiveness. We wear busyness like a credential, and it's not. We've been rewarded for that in different spaces, but busy is not productive. So making sure that you have time to take care of yourself. That self care is very important. Going back to toughness and vulnerability, being vulnerable enough to say, hey, I'm in a space where I need to take care of myself. I need to take care of my mental, debunking those things. And we said toughness and vulnerability are not opposite, they go together. And then, two, that busyness does not always mean effectiveness or productivity.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. And again, like I said, it's just so much that we just have to learn about this, to be able to continue to win this battle as a culture and a society. So, but again, so now we talked about just kind of how does somebody ask for, how do we see this earlier to recognize it, to see if we need to ask somebody if they need help. We've also talked about overcoming those stigmas and not being ashamed to ask for help. But a lot of this, I think about it, is the responsibility of just identifying and supporting mental health shouldn't only fall solely on that person who's actually struggling. So, um, in your opinion, and I think, and I know you and I have actually kind of briefly talked about this offline, with some of the projects that you're working on. What are some kinds of proactive programs or support systems that colleges, universities, organizations, companies, high schools, communities, that they could kind of implement to be more proactive in
Yeah.
addressing this instead of reactive?
I believe ongoing mental health training for coaches. It's not a one time workshop, but if they have that ongoing training so that they can actually be able to kind of see what's going on with their players outside of their performance, but their mental health, that's important. Maybe even embedding licensed clinicians inside the athletic departments before they go pro. But in that way, they have somebody to talk to, make them visible, make them trusted. Also, maybe like just normalizing mental health screenings, like we do when we need a physical, like a physical, right? You always need a physical. So what if we normalize mental health screenings the same way we did like physical checkups, and then get some peer support programs with athletes that trust athletes that's been going through some through the same thing, and we all get together and say, hey, this is a group that we've experienced this thing, so that we normalize the experience and we're not isolated. Also, leadership sets the culture. So reward the coaches, the teachers, the parents who develop people in this way, so that they're like it becomes something that they just do as a community. Some programs that are really helpful. I know I do the mental health suicide awareness sneaker ball every year here in Ohio, and now in Greensboro, North Carolina. That is to bring awareness to the language around suicide, the language around mental health, and getting communities engaged. We say if we do it as a community, that community will change another community, which then we may have a whole state that says, hey, we're taking a step for mental health and suicide awareness.
That support football teams and, basketball teams, that this is the same, you're cheering for your community just in a different way. And I think
Absolutely. And actually, I was thinking you brought up a good point. We cheer them on when they're on the field. How can we cheer them on when they're off the field,
Mhm,
off the court? So
yeah.
that I think that's important. If it starts that way, when they get to the field, they have a whole community of people rallying around them, whether they win or whether they lose, they're still great. And that's what we need to. That's what they need to hear, that you're still great. Win or lose, you're still great. Because that's somebody's kid, that's somebody's daughter, brother, sister, cousin, that's somebody's family member that has to deal with the impact of whatever comes along with being on that field or that court.
Yeah. What I hear you saying, I'm putting it together, it's about that support system. It's not just the fans, but it's everybody that's kind of around them. And I think that having that support system is a very important piece of it. So for if you say someone who may not feel like they have that support system around them right now, what would be some steps that you think that person or that athlete or that high school kid or whatever could take to start to try to build some kind of healthy support system around them?
Absolutely. If you don't naturally have it or it's not identifiable, start with the one person who constantly shows up with you, for you, even in the small way. Whether that's like getting your shoes and, or hey, you got a time to give me a 5 minute prayer. Find that one person that shows up consistently, and then be intentional. Lean in, be a little vulnerable for that one person that supports you consistently. The support is reciprocal, so you have to kind of grow into it. You can't think that it's going to be one-sided and think you're going to receive the same amount. It's going to be what you put into it. Seeking community supports, campus resources, faith groups, shared interest and connection. People who have just kind of dealt with the way that you deal with, people kind of gravitate to people who have the same interests. It becomes that. So if your support system is begging in like your, particularly in your house, those are the steps that I would say take. And let me be the first to say, therapy is not for a crisis. Therapy is for growth. People like to say, hey, I'm not coming because nothing's wrong with me. It's not always about something being wrong with you, but I like to ask what's right with you. And then when I tell you what's right with you and you can't answer that, then we dig deeper to figure out on the other end what's going on that you can't name what's right with you. So seeking therapy, not just in crisis, is helpful too, to build a support system.
As a culture, we look at therapy differently when we think about the different kinds of therapy, right? People don't have that same kind of mentality around like a physical therapy, right? Or an occupational therapy. Oh, this is to help me get better. I broke a bone in my hand. Let me get back to that. Like you said, mental health therapy is just as important, whether you're struggling or not, because you could strengthen other areas that are good for you, and that could also help with some of the areas that could be coming around the corner that you could be dealing with. But I think I am somebody who, I've done more than my fair share of both physical therapy and mental health therapy, and I
Yeah.
find value in both of them at all stages of life. Whether playing or whether being going through the depression. Just having somebody to talk to sometimes is a huge thing because, as you know, I'm somebody who likes to talk, and if I got to sit there and be around people and I can't talk to nobody, like I'm just starting to fester and I just want to say something. So the therapy gives me somebody who, and again, that at that point in time, I have somebody who's not gonna judge me.
Mm.
That is a safe place. You find a lot of athletes find their safe space on the court. That's important to them, being somewhere where they feel safe, and that is that
Yeah,
that is what that
absolutely.
therapy environment creates.
Yeah, and I would even say, yes, being on the court, that is a safe space. But being in therapy is when you get to take off the facade that you have to be on the court, on the
Mhm.
field, and that you don't have to be in authority, but you can just be. And that is creating a safe space, knowing that you can say whatever you want to say without any judgment. Um, in creating a safe space where you don't have to be the one that's always have the answers, that you can sit and receive answers.
Yeah, I don't have to always be on, and I know that what I'm saying to you is not gonna get back to the person that I'm dealing with, that I have the problem with, that is a big thing, so, uh yes, yes, and I appreciate it. So again, as we kind of look more back at sports, in the sports psychology, they have what's called the four C's, right? So a
Mhm.
lot of people look at it, their concentration, their commitment, their confidence, and their control. These are things that are often highlighted as essential for peak performance in athletes. But what are some of the more common mental health challenges that you see in the athletes that you work with? And are there any common themes or factors that tend to show up in athletes that we should be looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first one is anxiety. Again, it's a future-stricken emotion. So, I'm uncertain about if I'm going to make the team. When I make the team, am I going to hit the winning shot? Am I going to score the winning goal? Perfectionism, depression that's masked by overtraining, injury, trauma, identity crisis are all some of the common themes that I see. And then the common thread between those things is that self-worth fused to performance. As at the beginning of this talk, we talked about separating identity from performance, but that is the common theme where your self-worth now is fused with your performance. If I don't perform, then I'm not doing well and I'm not well. But if we recognize that identity of who you are before you were performing, then we have a greater chance of lessening the anxiety, the perfection, the depression, that are some of the things that we see. And every loss that becomes a personal, um, I want to say indictment, if I could think of a word, when the identity equals sports,
A personal
right?
reflection.
Yes, like that personal. Whenever loss, it becomes like I'm the reason that they lost. Like I start to take it personal because now sports is the identity. You don't have an identity outside of that performance, right? The biggest work that we need to do is building an identity that is bigger than the sport that you play.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think yeah, and I agree. It kind of dealing with the athletes that I deal with at the youth age. I always say we have to have the right people in the decision making process and in the decision making positions, right? If you got coach, a lot of programs are dealing with coaches who have never played the game, or to me that would be like struggling mentally and going to talk to somebody who doesn't have that background or that knowledge to be able to help you. But I think a lot of it, and that's led to, again, you talked about how people are basing their performance. I think a lot of people are basing their performance off of the wrong things, especially in a
Hmm.
basketball world. Kids these days, I'll talk to a kid and I'd be like, well, how'd your game go? If I didn't get to see the game, I'm like, well, how'd the game go? He's like, oh, I didn't play that good. I said, no, well, why not? He's like, oh, I only had 2 points. I missed all my shots. I was like, but if you look at it, you took 10 shots in that game, right? You played 25 minutes in the game. How long did it take you to shoot the 10 shots? About 2 seconds a shot. So you're going to tell me that 25 minutes of play is deemed bad because of we'll say 2.5 seconds times 10 shots. So you're going to tell me that 25 minutes of playing time was deemed bad because of 25 seconds of shots. You cannot have that association of, I'm only validated by what I put up, like by what my stats are. And that's
Hmm.
why I think, again, it's got to be more than these four C's that have to kind of go into it. And you have to understand, like we talked about at the very beginning, who are you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's an important question. The who are you? Most people cannot
Mhm.
answer that question outside of what they do.
Right. Yeah. And it's a tough one.
I do this activity, and I say write 10 things about yourself. Well, maybe five. Write five things on the paper that how you would introduce yourself. Okay. And then I say, now write five more things of how you would introduce yourself. Now take all of those things away. Now introduce yourself. What would you say?
Mhm.
And they're like, I don't have anything to talk about. I was like, well, isn't that funny? Who are you outside of those things? Who are you outside of your job? Who are you outside of an athlete? Who are you? What do you like to do? And it's like building people's awareness about themselves. And sometimes it makes people even like frustrated or for some cry because they can't tell you who they are
Yeah.
outside of the things that they listed. So
Yeah, and again, that kind of goes back to just the nature of sports, right? So because in sports, oftentimes, like you said, we are defined by our failures, right? And whether it's a missed shot, whether it's like you said, a loss or an injury, all of these are just parts of the overall experience. But they are things that kind of teach us lessons about life. They teach us about resilience and perspective. So, like, what are some of the things that you see that people would consider failures? I call them more you find ways that didn't work, right? So what
I
are
like it.
yeah, I just found ways that didn't work. So what are some lessons about resilience and perspective, and how can they help teach how people navigate just the failures that they're going to deal with in everyday life, not just on the
Yes.
playing apparatus?
So when I think, well, since we're talking about sports, sports is one of the greatest classrooms for resilience because inside sports, it's already built, like failure is built in, right? The question sports always forces you to ask yourself, who are you when things don't go well? We just talked about that. Failure is information, not an identity.
Hmm.
Failure is information, not identity. So, what I will say is either you win or you learn in life. So, the failure is to me like learning. I learned new information so that I don't repeat that again. And the process over outcome is what is taught in sports. There's a
Yeah.
process to winning.
Yeah. Yeah, you've jumped ahead without knowing. So, but no, so again, so like I said, as I go through these, I always like prepare stuff that I really want to make sure that we cover, stuff that we kind of dig into. But then I want to actually I want to pick the person's brain, right? So a lot of times after we go through all of that, I'll just do kind of quick hitters. I'll give you a question, you tell me the first thing that comes to mind. I don't want you to think about it. I don't want you to give me an explanation. I just want your immediate response. And one of the ones that I had prepared for you specifically was, which one is more valuable, going through the process or getting the outcome? It's literally what's on my paper right here.
I'm
Word
so
for word.
sorry.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, it's process over outcome. I like to put, I use pop, right? purpose, outcome, process, right? So what is the purpose of why I'm doing it? What is the outcome that I'm hoping to gain? And what is the process that is taking me to what process do I need to take to get to the outcome? And so I would say process over every time outcome, because the process is teaching you something in that moment that you can with a process that works, you can get a positive outcome. Again, event plus response equals outcome. So there's a process that happens before you get to an outcome, and you get to dictate what that outcome is with a proper process.
I totally agree, and I go back to the sports analogy. People say that, and that's why we practice, right? We practice to prepare for for that. So it's not about the actual outcome of the game. It's about that journey that got you there. All the lessons that you're going to learn along the way. Because if you don't learn it beforehand, how can I expect you to exhibit it in a game, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well,
You
again,
got
that
another.
was
You got another. I was like, do you have another fire question? I'll try not to
yeah,
mess up
yeah.
the
I've
interview.
got plenty of them.
Okay, give
uh,
give me one. What?
okay, so tell me your favorite personal sports memory.
Oh, so this is about my dad.
I knew
Can
it
I
would
talk
be.
about my dad?
Yes.
Okay, of course. My dad is like my superhero. But my dad was playing in Germany on the court. Of course, I wasn't really that old, maybe 4, 5, 6. I don't know. But I remember right before he goes to hit um, a shot, he pauses and asks the coach for a timeout. And he comes over there because I was standing because I went and sit down. He comes over, he comes over there to kiss me before he hits the shot. He does hit the shot. He makes the shot because he always drained threes. My dad, when he drains threes at 70, but he makes the shot. And I know that's not one like watching Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant playing, but that was so impactful for me that he took a moment out to be presently present for me, that his coach even allowed him to take that time out to be present for me, and that no matter what, if he won or not, I still thought he was a hero in my eyes. So
Hmm. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Now you're sure he made the shot, right? It's not just not you
he did
selectively
make the
remembering.
shot.
Okay.
Yeah, no, he did. He did make the shot. Now my dad, now his knees are a little shaky these days.
Oh,
But
I understand.
if we're draining threes, he can drain a three from somewhere at 70 plus. So I get excited when I see it. Like it doesn't happen often, but when I see it, I know that he still loves the game.
So, all right. Do you find it more beneficial to learn more from a winning lesson or a losing lesson?
A learning lesson. I would say a learning lesson because I don't feel like I ever lose. I just feel like I have to learn. But I think I believe that I learn more from a losing lesson.
Yeah, I agree with you. I find ways that didn't work, and now I'm no longer going to try those. So, all right, talking about emotions or journaling about them. What do you find to be more, or is it based on where you're at in the process?
I would, yeah, absolutely. I would go through the process. Um, Talking about emotions when you have words for the emotions would be beneficial, but when you don't really have words or emotional language to go with what's going on, journaling is better until you can figure out how to place that in the right direction.
Mm. All right. Do you find it more valuable to focus on strengths or fix weaknesses?
Focuses on strengths. Because although I know you said we're not supposed to talk, but I don't know how to not talk. So the weaknesses are areas of opportunity, but if you build somebody's strengths when you need to talk about the areas of opportunity, it won't feel like a weakness.
Hmm. Yep, very true. So, which do you find more beneficial for athletes? Coach accountability or self accountability?
Whoa. Mm. Now that one, I'm gonna say self accountability Because if you're true to yourself, you don't have to lie. If you're true to yourself, you don't have to lie to anybody else, and then you can add the coach in. But you gotta start with yourself first.
Very true. Boundaries or sacrifice?
Boundaries.
All right. Constructive criticism or positive reinforcement?
Ooh, constructive criticism. Can I say something about that?
Yeah, you just can't say both.
Well, I'm talking about constructive criticism because constructive criticism is meant to tear down,
Hmm.
and so I don't like that. So when you said the other one, which was
Positive reinforcement.
positive reinforcement, I would go with positive reinforcement because we do it to kids and they're successful.
Gotcha. Awesome. Like I said, I just wanted to kind of speed it up, kind of pick your brain, see what see where you were at on some topics since you jumped ahead to get to the process over the outcome. So again, a lot of this, what I'm doing in this project, it wouldn't be possible without all of my sponsors. So every episode, I do have a sponsor. Today's episode is proudly sponsored by Good Steward Bookkeeping. Good Steward Bookkeeping is dedicated to helping business owners take control of their finances with clarity, organization, and integrity. From accurate bookkeeping and detailed financial reporting to business tax preparations and ongoing financial support. Their team provides the structure and insight business owners need to operate and grow with confidence. Whether you're a small business owner trying to get your books organized, preparing for tax season, or simply looking for a clearer understanding of your company's financial picture, Good Steward Bookkeeping offers reliable, detail driven services designed to give you a peace of mind. At Good Steward Bookkeeping, stewardship isn't just a part of the name, it's a commitment to managing your finances with care, precision, professionalism, and accountability so that you can focus on what matters most, running and growing your business. We're proud to partner with a company that values responsibility, trust, and help businesses build a strong financial foundation for the future. Good Steward Bookkeeping, bringing clarity to your numbers and confidence to your business. So, all righty. Again, we've talked for a while, and I appreciate it. So, as I wrap up today's episode, I do have to thank my sponsors again, Good Steward Bookkeeping. But I also want to thank you, Keisha, for coming on here. And again, I'm full disclosure. Confidential Confessions Counseling is also one of my sponsors as well. Again, because we do feel the value in what you're doing, and hopefully finding good ways to partner as we move forward with this. So I appreciate you on both of those fronts. Again, sitting down, taking the time. I know you're busy, but I truly appreciate all the openness and perspective that you brought, because I think you've taught me some stuff, and I know people are going to get something from it. So before I let you go, I do want to give you the opportunity. I know you mentioned the sneaker ball, but just share with the audience anything you have going on, whether it's, you say any upcoming events you have, the dates, your social media, so they know where to find you, websites for the company, anything that you have going on, please take the floor. The floor is yours.
Yeah, so Keisha Saunders-Waldron of Confidential Confessions Counseling, PPLC. You can find us at CC Counseling on Instagram, K Saunders on Instagram, CC Counsel on Facebook, and www.cccounsel.me as a way to log into our website and get a free 10-minute consultation. We also have two major events that are going on this year. So if you are in the state of Ohio or in the state of North Carolina, please join us at our Suicide Awareness Sneaker Ball September 12th at the Westchester Marriott, of a night of community, dancing, fundraising, and education about how to end the stigma of mental health and suicide. And then the one in Greensboro at the Wyndham on September 26th. From 6 to 10, it is a mixer of people in the community just getting together and talking about how they're going to change how we view mental health and suicide in our community. We want to give a voice to the voiceless, so help us do that. Thank you.
Yeah. So when you talk about the sneaker ball, is there a way? Because again, I'm in Florida, and again, I'm as I grow this, I'm hoping I get people from all 50 states. Is there a way people from outside of Ohio and the great state of North Carolina can contribute, or help you in any way?
Yes, you can go to Better World Confidential Confessions Counseling and donate because you are giving a voice to the voiceless, and every donation will help support programs in the community to support saving a life. That life matters just like you matter.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And again, I'm so proud of you and everything that you're doing right now. It's humbling to me that you would take time out of your busy schedule and helping people to do this for me. So I think people are gonna learn a lot as they watch this episode. And just ultimately, I hope that we continue to grow this conversation and just create the education around it. So as we get ready to close the episode, I want to thank everybody for taking a few moments out of your day to listen to this to my story, listening to Keisha's story, and just kind of hearing a little bit about what we have going on here. So we thank you for joining us on Beyond the Game More Stories. If today's episode, connected with you in any way, please like, subscribe. We're everywhere you get content. We are on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, anywhere they're delivering content, I'm on there trying to get it to you. So, and additionally, if anything that you heard here, you think there's somebody that could benefit from this, because our motto here is we believe everybody has a story that somebody needs to hear. So if something that you heard today you think will connect with somebody, we ask that you forward this over to them, send them a link, let them get this good information. Or if it's just somebody that likes storytelling or just likes podcasts. Again, that's how we grow this thing. That's how we get this message out there. If you need more information on Beyond the Game More Stories, we're available online, www.btgms.com. On there, you can get more information as well as the official merchandise. I will send you shirts for the kids, I promise, because I want them to be able to continue to succeed and do that. And I appreciate and I applaud everything that you're doing. So, again, I'm your host, Dwayne Lightfoot. I appreciate the time you've come on here, Keisha. I thank you very
Thank you.
much. I could not do this without you and Confidential Confessions Counseling. You guys have helped me in more ways than I could express right now. But for those of you out there, thank you for taking the time today. Again, the game may end, but the lessons live on for a lifetime. So until the next time, we'll see you beyond the game.